At Christmas dinner, my sister-in-law Jennifer introduced me to the guests as an annoying old man who seemed to be doing nothing but bothering everyone with his presence. Everyone laughed, even my son Michael, but I remained silent, feeling anger boiling inside. She called me annoying, underestimating the years of sacrifice I had made for this family. Then I taught her a lesson that left everyone speechless. But it was only the beginning of a revenge that would change everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The fork trembled in my hand as Samantha raised her wine glass, that familiar smirk playing across her lips. The Christmas lights twinkled mockingly around the dining room I'd helped to pay for, casting shadows across faces that suddenly felt like strangers. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her voice cutting through the warm chatter of our extended family. To family. Even to those annoying old men who seem to do nothing but hover around, bothering everyone with their constant presence. The words hit me like ice water. Every conversation at the table stopped. Uncle Robert's laugh died mid-chuckle. Cousin Linda's smile froze. Even little Emma stopped playing with her new tablet, the one I'd bought her for $300. But it was Michael's reaction that destroyed something inside me. My son, my only child, simply chuckled and shook his head as if this were merely an amusing quirk of his wife's personality. "Oh, Samantha," he said with that weak smile I'd grown to despise. Not a word of defense? Not even an uncomfortable glance in my direction. I set my fork down carefully, the expensive china making a soft clink against the mahogany table I'd helped them buy. Around me, the gifts I'd brought, over $600 worth, sat forgotten beneath the tree, their silver wrapping paper gleaming like accusations. Samantha was wearing the diamond earrings I'd helped purchase for her last birthday, $2,000 of sparkle mocking me from her lobes. "Richard, honey, you know she's just joking," Aunt Margaret ventured, but her voice carried that strained quality people use when they're trying to smooth over something that can't be smoothed. I looked around the table, at the faces of people who'd eaten my food, accepted my gifts, smiled at my stories for decades. Not one of them met my eyes now. They were all studying their plates, their drinks, their hands, anywhere but the old man who'd apparently been bothering them all along. The room felt smaller suddenly, the warmth from the fireplace unable to reach the cold spreading through my chest. 43 years I'd worked to provide for this family. 43 years of careful budgets and sacrificed dreams so Michael could have everything he wanted. And this was how it ended. I stood up slowly, my napkin falling to the floor like a white flag of surrender. The movement seemed to break whatever spell had held the table silent. "Dad, where are you going?" Michael asked, but there was annoyance in his voice, not concern. I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The words I wanted to say would have burned the room down. Instead, I walked to the front closet and pulled on my coat. The same coat I'd worn for 8 years because new ones seemed like an unnecessary expense when Michael needed help with his mortgage. The cold December air hit my face as I stepped outside, and for the first time all evening, I could breathe. Behind me, I heard the murmur of conversation resuming, life moving on without the annoying old man who'd apparently overstayed his welcome. But as I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and immediate. But underneath it, growing like a flame in dry kindling, was something else entirely. Something that felt like the beginning of an ending. My house felt like a mausoleum when I walked through the door. Too quiet, too empty, too full of ghosts. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, the cheap kind, because the good stuff always seemed better saved for when Michael visited, which wasn't often anymore. I settled into my recliner, the one Martha had bought me for our 25th anniversary, and let the silence wrap around me. On the end table sat a framed photo from Michael's college graduation. He's beaming in his cap and gown, and I'm standing beside him, my hand on his shoulder, pride radiating from every line of my face. I remember that day so clearly, the way the sun felt on my back, the sound of Martha crying happy tears. The check I'd written that morning, $28,000 to cover his final semester, because, "Dad, I'm so close to finishing, and I promise I'll pay you back once I get a real job." The promise that never came. I pulled out the small wooden box I keep in the drawer beside my chair. Financial documents, receipts, bank statements, the paper trail of a father's love measured in dollars and cents. Martha used to tease me about keeping everything, but my accountant's mind couldn't let go of the details. Now I was grateful for that obsession. The wedding folder came first. $42,000 for Samantha's dream day. The venue she had to have, the dress that cost more than my car, the flowers that wilted 24 hours later. I'd remortgaged this house, the house Martha and I had worked 30 years to pay off, because this is your only son's wedding, Richard. You only get one chance to do it right. Underneath that, the real estate documents. $85,000 for their house down payment, pulled from my retirement savings. Michael had hugged me that day, called me the best father in the world. Samantha had actually cried, though looking back, I wondered if those were tears of relief rather than gratitude. The stack grew higher. Car payments for Michael's BMW, credit card bills for Samantha's shopping sprees, the boat they'd bought last summer with my co-signature, monthly transfers that had become as automatic as breathing, $1,000 here, $1,500 there, whatever crisis they faced, $437,000 over 8 years. I sat back in my chair, the numbers swimming in front of me. Nearly $500,000. The price of a house, a comfortable retirement, a legacy for the grandchildren I'd probably never have. Gone. The worst part wasn't the money, though. It was the memory of Martha's funeral, how Michael had approached me while I was still holding dirt from her grave. Dad, I know this is hard, but we should probably talk about the house situation soon. With Mom gone, this place is way too big for you. And Samantha and I have been thinking. Even then, even while Martha's casket was being lowered into the ground, he'd been calculating. I poured another bourbon and picked up the most recent bank statement. The automatic transfer to Michael's account. $3,000 just last month. For what? Christmas gifts, he'd said. For family. The family that called me an annoying old man. I thought about Martha then. Really thought about her. What would she say if she could see this? Would she tell me to forgive? To turn the other cheek? To remember that blood was thicker than water? Or would she remind me of the man I used to be? The one who'd built a successful career by reading people, by understanding numbers, by never letting anyone take advantage of him in the business world? That man wouldn't have tolerated this. That man would have demanded respect. The clock on the mantel chimed midnight, and I realized I'd been sitting there for 3 hours. 3 hours of memories, of adding up the cost of love, of understanding finally what I'd become. A walking ATM with a pulse. But ATMs had one advantage. They could be programmed to stop dispensing cash. I gathered all the papers, organized them into neat piles, the way I'd organized corporate budgets for decades. Each transaction, each sacrifice, each ignored promise. The evidence of a relationship built on withdrawals with no deposits. By the time I finished, the first gray light of dawn was creeping through the windows, and for the first time since Martha died, I felt something other than sadness. I felt powerful. Sleep was impossible. At 3:30 in the morning, I found myself at my kitchen table, the financial documents spread out before me like a battle plan. Numbers don't lie. They never had, not in 40 years of accounting, and they weren't lying now. I made coffee. Real coffee. Not the instant stuff I'd been buying to save money, and sat back down to study my son's financial life. Because that's what this was now. Not a father's love, but an accountant's audit. The pattern was clearer in the harsh fluorescent light. Every crisis, perfectly timed. Michael's urgent calls always came 3 days before rent was due, or 2 weeks before a credit card payment. Samantha's emergencies coincidentally aligned with sales at her favorite boutiques. They'd been playing me like a violin, and I danced to every note. I walked to the bathroom mirror and looked at myself. Really looked. When had I become this person? This stooped, tired man who apologized for taking up space at his own son's dinner table. Martha wouldn't recognize the shell I'd become, but underneath the defeated exterior, something was stirring. The same instincts that had built my career, that had helped me spot financial discrepancies worth millions in corporate accounts, that had made me one of the most trusted auditors in Connecticut. Those instincts were awake now, and they were hungry. I returned to the kitchen and opened my laptop. Time to see what my investment had really bought me. Within minutes, I'd accessed Michael's credit report. Easy enough when you're listed as a co-signer on half his accounts. The numbers made my stomach clench. $47,000 in credit card debt, $18,000 owed to something called Quick Cash Solutions at 28% interest, multiple late payments, collections notices, and a credit score that would make a bank loan officer laugh. All while he'd been asking me for a little help with groceries. But that was just the beginning. Samantha's social media told another story entirely. Photos from expensive restaurants I'd never heard of, shopping trips to Boston, a weekend in New York just last month. The same week she'd called crying about their heating bill, and then I found the real treasure. Her Instagram account, supposedly private, but accessible through a mutual friend's account. Photos from the past 6 months told a story that made everything else pale in comparison. Pictures of her with a man I didn't recognize. Intimate dinners, hands held across tables, hotel room backgrounds that definitely weren't from family vacations. The captions were even better. With my real love on one. Finally, someone who appreciates me on another. And the most damning, can't wait until this is all settled and we can be together properly. I screenshotted everything. By 6 a.m., I had a complete picture. Michael was drowning in debt, probably borrowing from dangerous people based on the interest rates. Samantha was planning her exit strategy with another man, and both of them saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to liquidating my assets. The automatic transfers stopped first. 3 clicks online, and the monthly flow of money ceased. Then I called the credit card company where I was listed as an authorized user and requested a detailed account of every purchase in the past year. The list was impressive. Designer handbags, expensive dinners, a weekend spa retreat, concert tickets, all charged to the card I paid, all for a life I wasn't invited to share. I canceled that card too. Then I did something I hadn't done in decades. I called in sick to my part-time consulting job and spent the entire day planning. Not reacting, not responding to crises, but planning. Like the old days when I'd walk into a boardroom with a briefcase full of evidence and watch grown executives squirm. The phone started ringing around noon. Michael, then Samantha, then Michael again. I let them go to voicemail. Let them wonder. Let them panic. Because for the first time in 8 years, I wasn't rushing to solve their problems. I was creating new ones. The 4th call came at 2 p.m., and I almost smiled when I saw Michael's name on the caller ID. Perfect timing, just when his automatic account transfer should have been processed and failed. I didn't answer. Instead, I poured myself another cup of coffee and returned to my laptop. There was more work to do, more digging, more planning. I had advantages they didn't know about. Connections in banks, in law firms, and places where favors were still owed to Richard Morgan, CPA. The man they'd turned into a joke was about to remind them why he'd been so successful for so many years. I wasn't just an annoying old man anymore. I was an annoying old man with nothing left to lose. The next morning I made a list. Not the kind of grocery list I'd been living by for years, but the kind of systematic investigation plan I used to create for corporate fraud cases. Start with what you know, dig for what you suspect, and never stop until you have the whole picture. What I knew, Michael and Samantha were using me. What I suspected was far worse. I started with the banking connections. 40 years in accounting had taught me that money leaves traces everywhere, and I still knew people who could read those traces. A call to Jim Patterson at First National was all it took. Richard Morgan. Jim's voice was warm. Haven't heard from you in months. How's retirement treating you? Actually, Jim, I need a favor. It's about my son. The concern in his voice was immediate. Everything okay? I'm not sure. Could you run a credit check for me? I'm worried about some of his financial decisions. What Jim found made my previous discoveries look like pocket change. Michael wasn't just in debt. He was in the kind of debt that came with broken kneecaps if you missed payments. 3 separate payday loan companies, 2 casino credit lines, and something called Eastside Financial Solutions that charged interest rates that should have been illegal. Total damage, $93,000. Jesus, Richard, Jim whispered through the phone. Your boy's in deep. These East Side guys, they're not the kind of people you want to owe money to. But it was what came next that really opened my eyes. There's something else, Jim continued. He's been using your name as a reference. Listed you as a co-guarantor on several applications, which is technically fraud if you didn't sign off on it. The rage that filled me was clean and cold. Not the hot anger from Christmas dinner, but something calculated and dangerous. They hadn't just been using my money. They'd been using my reputation, my credit, my good name as collateral in their schemes. I thanked Jim and hung up, then opened my laptop. Time to see what other secrets they'd been keeping. Samantha's affair partner turned out to be easier to identify than I'd expected. Cross-referencing her social media check-ins with public records gave me a name, David Hernandez, a real estate agent from Fairfield. Divorced, 2 kids, and based on his own social media presence. Not particularly wealthy, which explained why he'd need Samantha to come with assets. The hotel receipts I found in Michael's email, he'd been careless with passwords, another gift of his desperation, told an even uglier story. Not only was Samantha cheating, but they'd been planning together for months. Email chains about the old man's house and how much longer we have to wait. One email from David to Samantha made me physically nauseous. Once you get power of attorney, it should be easy enough. Nursing homes are expensive, and with his age, who's going to question the family making practical decisions? The house alone is worth $400K, plus whatever else he's got squirreled away. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were planning to have me declared incompetent. I printed everything. The picture that emerged over the following days was of 2 desperate people who saw me as their solution. Michael's gambling addiction had spiraled out of control after Martha died. Probably his way of dealing with grief, though that didn't excuse the lies. Samantha had been cheating for over a year, looking for her escape route while still enjoying the benefits of my financial support. And both of them had been counting on me being too weak, too guilt-ridden, too much of a devoted father to ever fight back. They'd been wrong about that. The final piece came from an unexpected source. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, knocked on my door Friday afternoon with a casserole and some gossip. I hope you don't mind me asking, dear, but is everything all right with Michael? He was here Wednesday afternoon, walking around your property with that young man I didn't recognize, measuring things. Measuring things. Oh yes, they had one of those laser measuring devices, spent quite a bit of time looking at the foundation, the roof line, walking the property boundaries. The young man was making notes in a folder. David Hernandez, conducting a property assessment while I was at my consulting job, probably getting ready to list the house the moment they had me declared incompetent and moved into some state facility. That night I sat in Martha's chair, something I hadn't done since she died, and organized everything I'd learned: bank records, email printouts, photographs, phone records I'd requested from my carrier showing the pattern of increasingly desperate calls. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was ammunition. I thought about the man I used to be, walking into boardrooms with briefcases full of proof, watching corporate executives realize their carefully constructed lies were unraveling. The satisfaction of justice served, cold and precise. That man was still here. Still sharp, still dangerous, still capable of playing chess while his opponents played checkers. The phone rang. Michael again, probably wondering why his credit cards weren't working, why the automatic transfers had stopped, why his financial house of cards was beginning to wobble. This time, I answered. "Hello, son," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I think it's time we had a talk." The game was about to begin. "Hello, son," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I think it's time we had a talk." But I hung up before he could respond. Let him stew in that for a while. The next morning, I drove to First National and requested a private meeting with Jim Patterson. By 10 a.m., I was sitting across from his desk with a checklist I prepared the night before. Every financial connection between my accounts and theirs, written in my careful accountant's script. "I need to make some changes, Jim. Comprehensive ones." The first item was the automatic transfer, $3,200 every month for the past 18 months. With a few keystrokes, Jim terminated it permanently. "Are you sure about this, Richard? That's a substantial amount. Is everything okay with Michael?" "Everything's exactly as it should be. I replied, checking off the first item on my list. Next came the authorized user accounts. Michael and Samantha were listed on 3 of my credit cards with a combined limit of $37,000. I'd added them years ago for emergencies that had somehow become weekly shopping trips and restaurant visits I never enjoyed. Remove them from all accounts. Close the cards entirely if necessary. Richard, this will affect their credit scores significantly. Good. By the time I left the bank, Michael and Samantha's financial lifeline had been completely severed. Car payment that I'd been covering for 2 years, $680 a month, would bounce next week. Insurance premiums on both their cars, their house, even Samantha's jewelry coverage, all set to lapse within 30 days. The country club membership was particularly satisfying to cancel. $450 a month, so Samantha could play tennis with women who probably laughed about her behind her back. I made sure to request the cancellation take effect immediately, meaning her weekend tennis tournament would be awkwardly interrupted. I spent the afternoon at Edward Jones working with my investment advisor to remove all beneficiary designations and change every password on every account. Martha and I had built these retirement funds carefully over decades, and I'd be damned if they'd become Michael's gambling money or Samantha's divorce settlement. The satisfaction was immediate and intoxicating. For years, I'd been an open wallet, a problem solver, a checkbook that never said no. Now I was a fortress with the gates sealed shut. My phone started ringing around 4 p.m. Michael's first call came when his credit card was declined at Morton's Steakhouse. I could picture him making excuses to whoever he was trying to impress, his face reddening with embarrassment. I let it ring. The second call came an hour later, probably when Samantha discovered her shopping spree at Nordstrom couldn't be completed. Her voice on the voicemail was shrill, demanding I call her back immediately to fix whatever computer error was affecting their accounts. Computer error, as if I didn't know exactly what I'd done. By evening, I had 12 missed calls and 7 increasingly frantic voicemails. The progression was almost textbook: confusion, irritation, anger, and finally, desperation. The last message from Michael actually had him admitting they were in a bit of a financial bind and needed the transfers restored as soon as possible. No apology for Christmas dinner, no acknowledgement of years of disrespect, just the assumption that I'd fix their problems like I always had. I poured myself a glass of the good bourbon, the bottle I'd been saving for Michael's visits, and settled into my chair with the evening news. For the first time in months, I wasn't worried about anyone else's crisis. Their emergency was no longer my problem. The phone rang again. Michael's name on the caller ID, probably calling from the parking lot of whatever establishment had just humiliated him with a declined card. This time, I answered. Dad, thank God. Listen, there's some kind of problem with the bank. All our cards are being declined, and the automatic transfer didn't go through. Can you call them first thing tomorrow and straighten this out? There's no problem, Michael. Everything is working exactly as intended. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. What do you mean, as intended? I mean, I've cut off your access to my accounts. Permanently. You... What? Dad, you can't be serious. We have bills due. Obligations. The mortgage payment alone is $2,400. Then I suggest you figure out how to pay it with your own money. Our own money? Dad, you know our situation. The economy. My job. Samantha's expenses. We've been depending on your help. Your situation is that you've been treating me like an ATM instead of a father. And Samantha's expenses include hotel rooms with David Hernandez, don't they? Another long silence. How did you? I'm not the foolish old man you think I am, Michael. I know about the gambling debts. I know about the affair. I know you've been planning to have me declared incompetent so you can steal my house. Dad, listen. I think there's been some misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding was mine. I thought I was helping my son build a life. Instead, I was financing my own humiliation. I could hear Samantha's voice in the background, sharp and angry, demanding to know what I was saying. Put me on speaker, Michael. I want to make sure Samantha hears this too. A click, then her voice, poison sweet. Richard, honey, Michael told me about your little tantrum. I'm sure we can work this out like adults. Can we? Like adults? Tell me, Samantha, when exactly did adults start calling their benefactors annoying old men at dinner parties? The sweetness disappeared instantly. Now you listen here? No. You listen. I've spent 8 years and over $400,000 trying to buy your respect. Now I understand that was impossible. You can't buy something that doesn't exist. 400,000? Michael's voice was strangled. Dad, that can't be right. Oh, it's very right. I have every receipt, every bank record, every canceled check. Would you like me to read the itemized list? The silence on the other end was deafening. I'll take that as a no. Now let me be very clear about what's going to happen next. You will not receive another penny from me. You will not use my name as a credit reference. You will not set foot on my property without permission. And if you continue your plans to have me declared incompetent, you'll discover that this annoying old man still has some very sharp teeth. I hung up before they could respond, then turned off the phone entirely. Let them figure out their own problems for once. They gave me exactly 18 hours before showing up at my front door. I was expecting them, had seen Michael's BMW pull into my driveway from the kitchen window, where I was enjoying my morning coffee. Real coffee again, from the expensive beans I'd been denying myself to save money for their crises. I didn't rush to answer the doorbell. Let them stand there and think about what they were going to say, how they were going to explain away 8 years of lies and disrespect. When I finally opened the door, they pushed past me without invitation, Samantha's heels clicking aggressively on Martha's hardwood floors. We need to talk, Michael announced, though his voice carried none of the authority he was trying to project. I'm listening, I said, settling into my recliner while they remained standing. A small power play, but sometimes small gestures carry the most weight. Samantha started immediately, her composure already fraying around the edges. This nonsense has to stop, Richard. You can't just cut us off without warning. We have commitments, responsibilities. Commitments to whom? Your bookie? Your boyfriend? Her face went white, then red. I don't know what you think you know, but I know about David Hernandez. I know about the hotel receipts. I know about your emails planning my future in a nursing home. I kept my voice level, conversational. I also know about Michael's $93,000 in gambling debts, including $18,000 to people who charge the kind of interest that comes with physical consequences. Michael dropped onto the couch like his strings had been cut. How could you possibly know that? The same way I built a successful career for 40 years, by paying attention to details and following the money trail. The same skills you've been counting on me not to use. Samantha began pacing, her designer purse clutched in her manicured hands like a weapon. You've been spying on us, violating our privacy. That's probably illegal. What's illegal is using someone's name as collateral without their permission. What's illegal is fraud. What's immoral is planning to steal someone's home while pretending to love them. Nobody's stealing anything. Michael's voice cracked. Dad, the assisted living thing, that was just us trying to plan for your future. Make sure you're taken care of when the time comes. When the time comes? I'm 67 and in perfect health. The only thing that needs taking care of is your debt problem and her boyfriend problem. Samantha stopped pacing and turned on me, her mask finally slipping completely. You selfish old bastard. After everything we've done for you, all the times we've included you in our lives, invited you to family events, invited me to be humiliated at my own son's Christmas dinner, to be called annoying while sitting at a table I helped pay for? You are annoying. The words exploded out of her. Always hovering, always wanting to be included, always asking questions about our business. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have friends over when you're here with your sad stories about mom and your boring job and your little suggestions about how we should live our lives? The room went dead silent. Even Michael looked shocked at his wife's venom. I stood up slowly, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. Michael, do you agree with your wife's assessment? He opened his mouth, closed it, looked between us like a child caught between angry parents. Dad, Samantha's just upset about the money situation. She doesn't mean... I mean every word. Samantha snarled. We've been carrying this family for years, managing his loneliness, dealing with his constant need for attention, and this is how he repays us? By ruining our lives over one little comment? One little comment. I turned to my son. Michael, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. When your wife called me an annoying old man in front of our entire family, what did you think I deserved from you in that moment? He squirmed under my gaze. Dad, I was just trying to keep the peace. Samantha has a way of expressing herself that takes getting used to. And what about when she told a table full of people that I do nothing but bother everyone with my presence? What did I deserve then? You know family dinners can get tense? Everyone says things they don't mean. I see. I walked to the front door and opened it. Then I think we understand each other perfectly. What does that mean? Samantha demanded. It means you're no longer welcome in my home. It means Michael has chosen his wife over his father, which is his right. And it means you'll both need to solve your financial problems without my help. Michael jumped up from the couch. Dad, come on. Don't be like this. Family is supposed to forgive each other. Family is supposed to respect each other. Family is supposed to defend each other. You've done neither. Samantha grabbed Michael's arm. Come on. We don't need to listen to this. Let him sit in his empty house feeling sorry for himself. See how that works out for him. But Michael hesitated at the threshold. Dad, what if we apologized? What if Samantha said she was sorry about Christmas? I looked at my daughter-in-law, watched her jaw clench at the very suggestion of apologizing to me. Will you apologize, Samantha? Will you tell me you're sorry for publicly humiliating me? For planning to steal my home? For treating me like an inconvenience instead of the man who made your lifestyle possible? She stared at me for a long moment, hatred burning in her eyes. I'm sorry you're too sensitive to handle the truth. Michael's shoulders sagged. That's what I thought, I said quietly. Goodbye, Michael. When you decide you want to be my son instead of her husband, you know where to find me. I closed the door behind them and listened to their arguing voices fade as they walked to their car. Through the window, I watched them drive away, probably heading back to their beautiful house that they couldn't afford, to their beautiful life that was built on my sacrifices and their lies. For the first time since Martha died, I was completely alone. And for the first time in years, that felt like freedom. The coffee shop on Bedford Street had become my refuge over the past week. Strange how liberating it felt to sit somewhere without worrying about phone calls or emergencies, to read the morning paper without interruption. I'd chosen a corner table where I could watch the door, old habits from years of business meetings where positioning mattered. I was halfway through an article about municipal budget concerns when a familiar voice interrupted my solitude. Richard Morgan? My goodness, is that really you? I looked up to see Laura Davis approaching my table, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the morning drizzle, her smile warm, but carrying that particular weight that comes from recent loss. We'd worked together briefly at Henderson & Associates 15 years ago before she'd taken early retirement to care for her ailing mother. Laura? I stood to pull out her chair. What a pleasant surprise. Please, join me. She settled across from me with the grace of someone who'd learned to carry herself well through difficult times. I heard about Martha, she said softly. I meant to call, but, well, you know how time gets away from you. Thank you, I'm managing. The automatic response, polished from months of practice. Are you? Really? Her blue eyes were too intelligent to accept platitudes. Because you look like a man who's been wrestling with something larger than grief. I found myself studying her face, remembering why I'd always respected her professional judgment. Laura had possessed an unusual ability to read people, to see past the numbers and understand the human stories behind financial decisions. Actually, I said, surprised by my own honesty, I've been dealing with some family complications. Michael and his wife? I nodded, wondering how much she'd heard through Stanford's surprisingly efficient gossip network. Laura signaled the waitress for coffee, then leaned forward slightly. Richard, I hope you don't mind my asking, but did they help you with any real estate decisions recently? Property sales, perhaps? Something in her tone made me set down my cup. No. Why do you ask? Because 18 months ago they helped me with one, and I'm beginning to think helped is entirely the wrong word. The story she told over the next 20 minutes made my blood run cold. Laura's mother had passed away suddenly, leaving behind a beautiful colonial in Stamford's historic district. Overwhelmed with grief and unfamiliar with current property values, Laura had mentioned the house to Michael during a chance encounter at the post office. He was so sympathetic, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Said he and Samantha knew the market well, that they could help me get a quick sale so I wouldn't have to deal with the stress of showings and negotiations. They'd brought her an offer within a week. $260,000 for a house that, Laura later discovered, was worth at least $340,000. But by then she'd already signed the papers, trusting in Michael's assurance that the market was soft and a quick sale was worth the discount. They even had a buyer lined up, she continued. Save me the realtor fees, they said. Very convenient. Her smile was bitter. The buyer turned out to be David Hernandez, Samantha's tennis partner, who sold it 6 months later for $370,000. They stole $80,000 from you, at least, and used your good name to do it. Michael kept mentioning what a respected accountant you were, how you taught him to be conservative with financial decisions. She stirred her coffee with unnecessary force. I trusted them because I trusted you. The weight of that betrayal settled over me like a lead blanket. Not only had they been using my money, they'd been using my reputation to defraud others. People who knew me, respected me, trusted my judgment enough to trust my son. Laura, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they were. Of course you didn't. She reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. You're a decent man, Richard. I could see it 18 months ago, and I can see it now. But your son, she shook her head. The apple fell very far from the tree. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two people who'd built careers on integrity, discovering they'd both been betrayed by the same source. What are you going to do about it? She asked finally. About what? About them. About the theft, the fraud, the way they've been treating you. Her eyes had a steel in them I remembered from the old days, when she'd been one of the toughest auditors in the state. Because I know you, Richard Morgan. You didn't build a successful practice by letting people walk all over you. I found myself smiling for the first time in days. Actually, I've already started. I told her about the financial cutoff, about the evidence I'd gathered, about the confrontation in my living room. Laura listened with the focused attention of someone who understood both the emotional and strategic implications of what I was describing. You've done good work, she said when I finished, but you're thinking too small. How so? You're fighting a defensive battle, cutting them off, protecting your assets, reacting to their moves. She leaned forward and I could see the brilliant mind that had made her so successful. But with what we know about their methods, their patterns, their weaknesses, we could destroy them completely. The word we hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility. We? I may be retired, Richard, but I still have contacts. Real estate agents who've dealt with Samantha's pushy tactics. Loan officers who've seen Michael's creative applications. People who've been wondering about certain transactions, but never had enough information to act. Her smile was predatory. Together we could give them all the information they need. I studied her face, seeing not just intelligence, but something deeper. A hunger for justice that matched my own, tempered by the patience and skill of someone who'd spent decades building airtight cases. What did you have in mind? A systematic campaign to expose every fraudulent transaction, every lie, every scheme they've been running, not just for revenge, Richard, though I won't pretend that's not part of it, but because people like your son and his wife don't stop until someone stops them. The idea was intoxicating. Not just cutting them off, but cutting them down. Using our professional networks, our knowledge, our combined resources to ensure they could never harm anyone else the way they'd harmed us. It would be complicated, I said slowly. We'd need to be very careful, very thorough. I've been careful and thorough my entire career. Laura's smile held a warmth that went beyond professional respect. And if I remember correctly, so have you. We exchanged phone numbers, made plans to meet at her house the following evening. As I walked her to the parking lot, I realized something had shifted in the past hour. For the first time since Martha's death, I didn't feel alone in the world. And for the first time since Christmas dinner, I felt dangerous. Laura's house was exactly what I'd expected. Understated elegance that spoke of good taste rather than flashy wealth. She'd chosen the Tudor-style home after her mother's death, she explained as she led me through rooms furnished with antiques that had clearly been chosen for their beauty rather than their value. I downsized significantly, she said, pouring wine in her study. Turns out I needed much less space and much more peace. The study itself was impressive, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a mahogany desk that had probably been her father's, and filing cabinets that suggested someone who still kept meticulous records despite retirement. I've been thinking about our conversation, I said, accepting the glass she offered, about what we could accomplish together. And? I think you're right. They won't stop until someone stops them. Laura opened the center drawer of her desk and pulled out a legal pad covered with her neat handwriting. I've been making some preliminary notes. People to contact, questions to ask, evidence we'd need to gather. I moved to look over her shoulder, immediately impressed by the thoroughness of her thinking. She'd organized potential contacts by category: banking, real estate, law enforcement, regulatory agencies. Each section included names, phone numbers, and brief notes about how they might be able to help. Margaret Chen at First Federal, I read aloud. She's still there? Still there. Still in charge of fraud investigations and still remembers us from the Henderson days. Laura looked up at me. She's always been suspicious of quick cash real estate deals. I think she'd be very interested in the pattern we could show her. We spent the next 2 hours building what was essentially a military campaign. Laura's knowledge of the local real estate market combined with my banking connections created a web of contacts that could investigate every aspect of Michael and Samantha's schemes. The beauty of it, Laura said, refilling our glasses, is that we don't have to prove anything ourselves. We just have to ask the right questions to the right people and let the professionals do their jobs. The plan that emerged was elegant in its simplicity. We would systematically contact every relevant authority with carefully documented concerns about specific transactions. Not accusations, but questions. Patterns they might want to investigate. Inconsistencies they might find interesting. Michael's employer should probably know about the gambling debts, I said, adding another note to our list. Insurance companies get nervous about employees with serious financial pressure. And the country club should know about the membership fraud, Laura added. I happen to know they take credit applications very seriously. By 10 p.m., we had a comprehensive timeline. Each contact would be made in a specific order, designed to create maximum disruption while maintaining our own plausible deniability. We weren't seeking revenge. We were concerned citizens reporting potential fraud to the appropriate authorities. There's one more thing, Laura said as we reviewed our notes. Something I didn't mention yesterday. She pulled another folder from her desk, this one containing photographs and documents I didn't recognize. After my mother's house sold, I started paying attention to other quick sales in the neighborhood. There have been 7 in the past 2 years, all involving elderly sellers, all significantly under market value. She spread the photos across her desk. 3 of them involved Michael and Samantha as helpful neighbors who facilitated the sales. The scope of their operation was staggering. They weren't just opportunistic thieves. They were running a systematic scheme to defraud vulnerable elderly homeowners. My God, I whispered. How much money are we talking about? Conservative estimate? About $400,000 in lost value across all the sales. But the real crime is what they did to those people. Convinced them they were being helped while they were being robbed. I thought about Mrs. Patterson next door, about the other elderly neighbors in my area who might be vulnerable to exactly this kind of manipulation. We have to stop them. Yes, Laura said quietly. We do. She moved to sit beside me on the small sofa by her fireplace, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that reminded me of better times. Richard, she said, her voice softer than it had been all evening. I want you to know that this isn't just about justice for me. working with you, planning this. It's the first time I've felt truly engaged with anything since Mother died. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just an ally, but a woman who'd been as lonely as I had, as hungry for purpose and connection. Laura, I started, then stopped, unsure how to voice what I was feeling. I know, she said simply. It's too soon to know what this is between us. But I want you to know that whatever happens with Michael and Samantha, I'm grateful to have you back in my life. The moment stretched between us, warm and full of possibility. Then Laura's phone rang, jarring us back to reality. Laura Davis? She answered, then frowned. Yes, this is she. What? When did this happen? I watched her face change, saw the satisfaction creep into her expression as she listened. I see. Yes, I can provide additional information if needed. Thank you for calling. She hung up and turned to me with a smile that was absolutely predatory. That was Margaret Chen at First Federal. Apparently someone called in a suspicious activity report on Michael's accounts this afternoon. They're freezing his assets pending investigation. Someone called it in? Someone who shall remain nameless but has excellent instincts about financial fraud. Her smile widened. The game has begun, Richard, and we're already winning. Outside, the October wind was picking up, rattling the windows of Laura's cozy study, but inside we were warm and focused and absolutely committed to destroying the people who'd hurt us. It was going to be a very interesting autumn. The process server arrived at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning, just as I was finishing my coffee and reviewing the financial documents Laura and I had organized the night before. Through the window, I watched a young man in a cheap suit check house numbers before walking up my front path with the determined stride of someone delivering bad news. Richard Morgan? That's me. You've been served. The legal document felt heavier than it should have, its official seal and formal language stark against the morning sunlight streaming through my kitchen windows. As I read, my coffee grew cold and my hands began to tremble, not from fear, but from rage so pure it felt like electricity in my veins. A petition for appointment of guardian and conservator, filed by Michael Morgan on behalf of his mentally incapacitated father, who could no longer manage his financial affairs due to advancing dementia and erratic behavior. The lies were breathtaking in their audacity. According to the petition, I'd been exhibiting signs of confusion and memory loss for months. There were affidavits from concerned neighbors describing my increasingly erratic behavior and poor judgment in financial matters. Dr. Harrison, a physician I'd never heard of, had supposedly examined me and found significant cognitive decline consistent with early-stage dementia. Every word was fiction. Every signature was fraud. I called Laura immediately. They've filed for guardianship, I said without preamble when she answered. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. On what grounds? Mental incompetence. They're claiming I have dementia. Those magnificent bastards. Her voice carried equal parts admiration and fury. It's actually brilliant in a completely sociopathic way. If they can have you declared incompetent, they get control of everything. Your house, your accounts, your decisions about your own care. Within an hour, Laura was at my kitchen table, reading through the petition with the focused intensity of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. This Dr. Harrison, she said, tapping the forged medical report. I know him. He lost his license 3 years ago for filing false insurance claims. Someone paid him to create this fiction. Can they actually win with fabricated evidence? They can if you don't fight back properly. Laura pulled out her phone. But they've made a crucial mistake. They filed this petition while you're actively managing complex financial investigations, coordinating with multiple professionals, and demonstrating mental acuity that would impress people half your age. She was right. While Michael and Samantha had been planning to have me declared incompetent, I'd been proving the opposite. The evidence we'd gathered, the strategic planning we'd implemented, the professional relationships I'd leveraged, all of it demonstrated a mind working at peak efficiency. We need a lawyer, I said. I know exactly who to call. By afternoon, I was sitting in the oak-paneled office of Patricia Weber, one of Connecticut's most respected elder law attorneys. Laura had worked with her during her mother's estate planning and Patricia's reputation for protecting elderly clients from exploitation was legendary. "Mr. Morgan," Patricia said after reviewing the petition, "I've seen attempted financial abuse cases, but this is remarkably sophisticated fraud. They've created an entire fictional narrative about your mental state. Can they make it stick?" "Not if we handle this correctly." Patricia leaned forward, her steel gray hair and sharp eyes giving her the appearance of someone who'd spent decades winning difficult battles. "The irony is that their petition actually works in our favor. By claiming you're incompetent to manage financial affairs, they've opened the door for us to present evidence of exactly how competent you are." Over the next week, we prepared our counterattack with military precision. Patricia's investigator quickly discovered that Dr. Harrison was indeed unlicensed, and that several of the concerned neighbors who'd signed affidavits had been paid $50 each for their signatures. Meanwhile, Laura and I documented every aspect of my mental acuity: bank records showing my systematic financial analysis, professional references from colleagues who'd worked with me recently, evidence of the complex investigation I conducted into Michael and Samantha's fraud. "The hearing is scheduled for next Friday," Patricia informed me during our final preparation meeting. "They're hoping to rush this through before you can mount an effective defense, but we're going to give them a very unpleasant surprise." The Wednesday before the hearing, Michael called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Dad." His voice was shaky, uncertain. "I heard you hired a lawyer." "I did." "Patricia Weber." "I assume you know the name?" "Dad, this whole guardianship thing, maybe we moved too fast. Maybe we could work something out without involving the courts." The desperation in his voice was music to my ears. "What kind of something, Michael?" "I could withdraw the petition. We could forget this whole thing happened. Go back to the way things were." "You mean go back to you and Samantha stealing from me while calling me an annoying old man?" "I never meant for Samantha to say that. You know how she gets when she's had wine." "I know exactly how she gets. I also know about the $93,000 you owe to people who break kneecaps for late payments. I know about her affair with David Hernandez. I know about the nursing home you were planning to put me in so you could steal my house." The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. "How do you know all that?" "Because I'm not the confused old man you thought I was. I'm the accountant who built a successful career by following money trails and exposing fraud. And Michael? You and your wife have committed enough fraud to put you both in prison." "Dad, please. We can fix this. I'll make Samantha apologize. We'll pay back the money." "With what money?" "You lost your job yesterday." Another silence. "What?" "Your employer received some very interesting information about your financial situation. Gambling debts, compromised security clearance, using company resources for personal matters. I believe they escorted you out of the building around 3 p.m. You destroyed my career. You destroyed your career. I simply made sure the right people knew about it." I hung up before he could respond, then turned to Laura, who'd been listening from the kitchen doorway. "How did it feel?" she asked. "Like justice," I said. Finally. But even as I savored the moment, I knew the real battle was just beginning. The hearing was in 2 days, and Patricia had warned me that desperate people do desperate things. Michael and Samantha had already proven they were willing to commit fraud to steal my independence. The question was, how much further would they go when they realized they were losing? Part 10. The professional destruction of Michael. The morning after my conversation with Michael, I sat in Laura's study making the phone calls that would complete his professional destruction. She'd already brewed coffee and laid out our carefully organized files, bank records, employment documents, professional contacts, all the ammunition we needed to ensure Michael would never work in his field again. "Jim Patterson first," I said, dialing my old banking contact. "Then Margaret Chen, then the regional compliance director." Laura nodded, her own phone ready. She'd volunteered to handle the social and business connections while I focused on the financial institutions. Our coordination was seamless now, like a machine designed for systematic destruction. "Jim, it's Richard Morgan. I need to report some concerning information about potential compliance violations." The conversation was brief and devastating. Within 20 minutes, Jim had flagged Michael's name across 3 major banking networks, Any future employment applications would trigger automatic background checks revealing the gambling debts, the falsified credit applications, the pattern of financial irresponsibility. Margaret, Richard Morgan from the Henderson days, I have some information about fraudulent real estate transactions you might find interesting. By noon, Michael's name was being circulated through compliance networks across Connecticut's financial sector, not as a criminal, though that might come later, but as a liability risk, someone whose financial problems made him unsuitable for positions requiring trust and discretion. Laura's calls were equally productive. The country club, already suspicious about late dues, received detailed information about Michael's gambling debts and his recent termination. His membership was revoked that afternoon, effective immediately. The beautiful part, Laura said as we reviewed our morning's work, is that everything we're reporting is absolutely true. We're not destroying his reputation. We're simply making sure people know what his reputation actually is. The domino effect began almost immediately. Michael's former employer, a mid-sized financial services firm, called to verify his departure with their parent company. When the parent company learned about the gambling debts and fraud allegations, they immediately flagged Michael as a security risk across their entire network. His professional certifications came next. The state licensing board received anonymous tips about conduct unbecoming a financial professional. While investigations would take months, the mere existence of open complaints would make him unemployable in his field. But the cruelest cut came from an unexpected source. David Hernandez, Samantha's affair partner, worked for a real estate firm that occasionally partnered with Michael's former employer. When David learned about Michael's professional destruction and realized his affair with Samantha might become public knowledge, he immediately distanced himself from both of them. Samantha called me that evening, her voice shrill with panic. "What did you do to Michael's job?" I told the truth about his financial situation. Apparently, employers care about employees who owe money to criminals. "You vindictive old..." "Careful, Samantha. Everything you say to me now is being recorded. I'm sure Patricia Weber would love to play it for the judge." The line went dead. Laura had been listening from the kitchen, and she brought me a glass of wine as I hung up. "How many companies have you contacted today?" 17. All of them now have Michael flagged as unemployable. I accepted the wine gratefully. It's remarkable how quickly professional networks can destroy someone when they finally learn the truth. "He'll never work in finance again," Laura said with satisfaction. "Not in Connecticut anyway. Maybe not anywhere." The next morning brought news that our campaign had exceeded even our expectations. Michael's mortgage company, alerted by their fraud prevention team, had accelerated his loan due to material changes in employment status and creditworthiness. He had 30 days to pay off the entire balance or face foreclosure. His car was repossessed that afternoon. I didn't witness it, but Mrs. Patterson called to tell me she'd seen the tow truck in Michael's driveway. "Such a shame," she said, though her tone suggested she didn't think it was shameful at all. "Always seemed like such a nice young man. You just never know about people, do you?" "No," I agreed. "You really don't." By evening, Michael was calling every hour. I let the calls go to voicemail, then played them back for Laura's entertainment. The progression was fascinating from a psychological perspective. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, all cycling through his voice as each new crisis hit. "Dad, please, I know you're angry, but this has gone too far. I lost my job, my car, they're foreclosing on the house. Samantha's family won't help us. We have nowhere to go. Dad, I'll do anything. I'll publicly apologize. I'll pay back every penny. Just please stop destroying my life. Dad, I know I made mistakes, but I'm your son. Blood is supposed to mean something. How can you do this to your own family?" The final message came at 11 p.m. "I get it now. You're not just angry. You're sick. This isn't normal behavior. When we prove you're incompetent in court, everyone will understand that this was all the dementia talking." I saved that message specifically. Patricia would enjoy using it to demonstrate Michael's complete lack of remorse and understanding. "He still doesn't get it," Laura observed as we listened to the recordings together. "He thinks this is about anger or revenge. He doesn't understand that this is about consequences. 40 years in business taught me that people who don't face consequences for their bad behavior just escalate to worse behavior," I replied. "Michael and Samantha have been escalating for years. It was time someone stopped them. The next morning brought the news I'd been waiting for. Samantha's employer, a marketing firm that prided itself on its family-friendly image, had learned about her affair and her involvement in elder abuse allegations. They'd terminated her employment due to conduct incompatible with company values. Within 48 hours, both Michael and Samantha were unemployed, facing foreclosure, and completely cut off from their previous social and professional networks. Their carefully constructed lifestyle had collapsed like a house of cards. But I knew they wouldn't surrender easily. Desperate people do desperate things, and the competency hearing was tomorrow. With nothing left to lose, they might try anything. Laura and I spent that final evening reviewing our evidence one more time, making sure we were prepared for whatever desperate gambit they might attempt in court. "Are you ready for this?" she asked as we closed the last file. "I've been ready since Christmas dinner," I replied. "Tomorrow we finish what they started." The morning of the competency hearing, I woke to find an envelope slipped under my front door. Inside was a USB drive and a note in Laura's elegant handwriting. "The final evidence. Play this for Patricia before court. Ella." I plugged the drive into my laptop and discovered video files Laura had somehow obtained from the security cameras at the hotels where Samantha had conducted her affair. The footage was damning. Clear images of her entering rooms with David Hernandez, timestamps showing the frequency of their meetings, receipts from room service charged to credit cards I'd been paying off. But the real treasure was an audio file Laura had recorded during a chance encounter with Samantha at the shopping center yesterday. Samantha, stressed and unguarded, had revealed far more than she'd intended about their plans for me. "Once we get control of his money, the first thing we do is sell that house. I'm not waiting around for him to die naturally. He could live another 20 years. The nursing home will speed things up. Those places are basically death warehouses anyway." Even after everything they'd done, hearing my daughter-in-law casually plan my demise made my hands shake with rage. I called Patricia immediately. "This changes everything," she said after reviewing the evidence. "We're not just defending against false incompetency claims anymore. We're presenting evidence of elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. I'm requesting criminal charges be filed simultaneously with our defense." An hour before the hearing, Laura arrived with news that completed Samantha's destruction. "David Hernandez dumped her yesterday," she announced with satisfaction. Apparently, when his employer learned about the affair and the fraud allegations, they gave him a choice: end all contact with Samantha or find a new job. He chose the job. He chose the job. Samantha showed up at his office this morning, screaming and threatening to sue him for promises he'd made about their future together. Security had to escort her out. The hearing itself was a masterpiece of legal theater. Patricia had arranged for 3 character witnesses, former colleagues who could testify to my sharp mental acuity. She'd also subpoenaed my recent bank records, showing the sophisticated financial analysis I'd conducted over the past weeks. Michael and Samantha arrived looking like refugees from their former life. His suit was wrinkled, probably the only one he owned after having his credit cards canceled. Her designer dress was at least 6 months old, ancient by her standards, and her usual perfect makeup couldn't hide the strain around her eyes. Their lawyer, a sleazy man named Richardson who advertised on bus benches, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Patricia had informed me that Richardson specialized in quick cash legal schemes and had already been reprimanded twice by the state bar. Judge Harrison, a different Harrison than the fake doctor, was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd built her reputation on protecting elderly rights. She reviewed the petition with obvious skepticism before turning her attention to the evidence. "Mr. Richardson," she said, "your clients allege that Mr. Morgan is mentally incompetent to manage his affairs, yet I see evidence here of sophisticated financial analysis, complex legal research, and coordinated professional communications. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Richardson fumbled through his notes. "Your Honor, the respondent has been influenced by outside parties who may be manipulating him for their own gain." "You mean Ms. Davis, the retired accountant who's helping him organize evidence of your client's fraudulent activities?" "Your Honor, we believe—" "Let me stop you there." Judge Harrison's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to cutting through nonsense. "I've reviewed Ms. Weber's evidence regarding the falsified medical reports, the paid witness statements, and the clear pattern of elder abuse. I'm more concerned about your client's competency than Mr. Morgan's." What followed was 30 minutes of systematic humiliation. Patricia presented the audio recording of Samantha discussing nursing home plans. She showed the fake medical reports and the payments to false witnesses. She demonstrated the clear pattern of financial exploitation and emotional abuse. Michael tried to interrupt several times, but Judge Harrison silenced him with increasingly sharp warnings. Samantha sat in stony silence, probably realizing that every word she'd spoken in anger was about to be used against her. The breaking point came when Patricia played the audio of Samantha calling me an annoying old man at Christmas dinner. Laura had somehow obtained a recording from another guest's phone. "This is your daughter-in-law's idea of loving family care?" Judge Harrison asked Michael directly. "Your Honor, Samantha was she has a difficult way of expressing herself sometimes." "And this difficult expression included planning to have your father declared incompetent so you could steal his house?" Michael's face crumpled. "We weren't stealing. We were planning for his future care. By committing fraud? By filing false medical reports? By paying people to lie about his mental state?" The judge's final ruling was swift and devastating. Not only was the competency petition dismissed with prejudice, but she was referring the case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Michael and Samantha were also ordered to pay all court costs and attorney fees, but Judge Harrison wasn't finished. "Mr. Morgan," she said, addressing Michael directly, "you have participated in one of the most callous attempts at elder abuse I've seen in 20 years on this bench. You should be ashamed to call yourself this man's son." As we left the courthouse, Samantha finally exploded. In the parking lot surrounded by attorneys and court officials, she screamed accusations at me that sealed her fate completely. "You destroyed our lives. You ruined everything. I hope you die alone and miserable, you pathetic old fool." Patricia's investigator captured every word on video. Within a week, Samantha had been arrested on fraud charges. The district attorney, motivated partly by the egregious nature of the elder abuse and partly by political pressure to prosecute financial crimes against seniors, filed charges that could result in significant prison time. Michael, faced with the choice of cooperating with prosecutors or joining his wife in prison, chose cooperation. The divorce papers were filed the following Monday. Laura and I watched it all unfold from the safety of my kitchen, sharing morning coffee and reading about their destruction in the local newspaper. "She'll probably serve 18 months, Laura said, reading the criminal charges. "Michael might avoid prison if he testifies against her, but his career's finished forever." "Good," I said, and meant it completely. Justice, it turned out, tasted like good coffee and felt like morning sunshine streaming through clean windows. 3 months later, I answered my doorbell to find Michael standing on my front porch, holding a letter in his trembling hands. He looked older, thinner, his expensive clothes replaced by a simple sweater and jeans that had seen better days. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen in my son before: genuine humility. "Dad," he said quietly, "could we talk?" I stepped aside to let him in, noting how he glanced around the living room as if seeing it for the first time. Maybe he was. Maybe he'd never really seen this house as anything more than a future asset to be liquidated. "Samantha got 18 months, he said without preamble. "The divorce was finalized last week." I heard. "I'm working at a hardware store in Norwalk. Minimum wage. The owner took a chance on me despite everything." He looked down at his hands. "I'm living in a studio apartment over Mrs. Chen's garage. She remembers you from the old neighborhood. Says you were always kind to her late husband." I waited. This conversation was his to drive. "I want to apologize," he said finally. "Not because I want something from you, because I know that bridge is burned, but because you deserve to hear it. I was wrong about everything. About Samantha. About you. About what family means. What changed your mind? Losing everything." He managed a weak smile. "Turns out when you have nothing left, you finally see what you actually had. I had a father who loved me enough to sacrifice everything for my happiness, and I threw it away for a woman who didn't even like me, let alone love me." I studied his face, looking for traces of manipulation or self-pity, but what I saw was simply exhaustion and regret. "The competency hearing," I said. "That was your idea or hers?" "Hers, but I went along with it." He met my eyes directly. "That's on me." I let her convince me you were becoming difficult, that you needed managing. I was too stupid to realize she was the one who needed managing. And the nursing home plan? All her. I swear to you, Dad, I never agreed to that. When I found out about it, when I heard that recording, he shook his head. I understood then what kind of person I'd married, what kind of person I'd become by choosing her over you. We sat in silence for several minutes. Through the kitchen window, I could see Laura working in what had become our shared garden, her silver hair catching the afternoon sunlight. Is that Mrs. Davis? Michael asked, following my gaze. Yes. We're together now. Good. He seemed to mean it. You deserve someone who appreciates you. What do you want from this conversation, Michael? Nothing, he said immediately. I mean that. I'm not asking for money or help or forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did, and I'm sorry. I believed him. Maybe because he looked so broken, or maybe because for the first time in years, he wasn't asking me to solve his problems. I do forgive you, I said finally. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back to the way things were. I know. If we're going to have any relationship going forward, it has to be based on respect. Real respect, not the pretend kind you showed me while stealing from me. I understand. No more money. Ever. No co-signing. No emergencies. No loans. You're a grown man, and grown men solve their own problems. I wouldn't ask. And Laura's part of my life now. If you can't treat her with the same respect you'd show your mother, then we have nothing to discuss. Of course. I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. You can call me once a month. We can have dinner occasionally. But we're rebuilding from the ground up, and that's going to take time. Michael stood as well, looking relieved rather than disappointed. Thank you, Dad, for listening, for giving me a chance. After he left, I found Laura in the garden, her hands dirty from transplanting the roses we'd bought together. How did it go? She asked, not looking up from her work. Better than I expected. I think he might actually have learned something. And Samantha? Prison. Where she belongs. Laura straightened, wiping her hands on her gardening apron. Any regrets? I considered the question seriously. 3 months ago, I'd been a lonely, disrespected old man, being systematically robbed by his own family. Today, I was respected, financially secure, legally vindicated, and in love with a remarkable woman who treated me as an equal partner. None, I said. Not one. That evening, Laura and I sat on the front porch with wine and the travel brochures we'd been collecting. Italy in the spring, we decided, then maybe Scotland in the summer. We had the time, the money, and each other. You know what I realized today? Laura said, leaning against my shoulder. What's that? We never would have found each other if Michael and Samantha hadn't been such terrible people. In a strange way, I'm grateful to them. I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, mixed with the evening jasmine from our garden. Don't let them hear you say that, I said. They might think they deserve credit for our happiness. Laura laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet neighborhood where I'd lived for 30 years, but had never felt truly at home until now. My phone rang. Michael's monthly call, right on schedule as we'd agreed. We talked for exactly 15 minutes about his job, his small apartment, his slow progress toward rebuilding his life. No drama, no crises, no requests for help. Just a son checking in with his father, showing respect through consistency. When I hung up, Laura was watching me with gentle eyes. How was he? Learning, I said. Slowly, but learning. And how are you? I looked around at my life. My beautiful house that no one was trying to steal, my secure finances that no one was draining, my loving partner who chose to be with me rather than using me, my son who was finally becoming a man worthy of respect. I'm exactly where I belong, I said. Finally. The annoying old man, it turned out, had been the strongest person in the room all along. He just needed to remember it. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.